Okay.
Long list of notes.
I wouldn't stand right there. You might get run over. The mayor may be on his. He should be on his way.
Yeah, Blunt's also finally decided to join us. He's also on his way. So that should
I got you. All right.
hopefully work.
Is Blunt? Is this mostly your opinion, or is Blunt's opinion also weighed
So,
in? Just for my own understanding.
80% of this is my own opinion. I have a bunch of notes listed here. Who has his own concerns, I believe. He's either adding them into the report or he will just be saying them.
Yep.
Gunnar also has his own concern. And then I also have the PMC bill, which we discussed earlier.
Okay. Has that been written by any chance?
I have not written it, but I have a lot of dot points of what it would require. I have the general outline, but it's not.
So that I've got an understanding going into it. Is Blunt open to the idea of writing something for tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. That makes
What do you
things
mean by writing something for tomorrow?
Like, if there was the PMC bill, he writes one up. You know what I mean?
So Blunt can write it, or I can write it, and he can co-sign on my behalf. Either way, that works.
The reason I bring that up, right, is a lot of times this becomes like a resource issue. And
110%.
I'm generally of the opinion, if we propose something, whether it's my department, in this case your department, that we have someone facilitate the writing thereof, so that, you know, we're not writing on behalf of, you understand what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. Because frankly, like, I get as to why they want this bill. I do want portions of it, but it's just there are specific pieces of wording in it that leave me incredibly confused. That is my whole thing. That has been my whole thing from day one, and that is why I chose to do this.
Okay. So to get you guys sort of up to speed a bit, there is of my belief that there's just kind of like this meeting is going to resolve a lot of concerns, and the idea here is a contest is good. Contests are good, but contests are good when let's say there is simple disagreements, right? Like, for example, this should be legal, this should be not illegal, we want this clause, that clause. But I think the amount of there's enough of a difference of opinion that a meeting is significantly more conducive to coming to a common ground. And if we can come to that common ground, the impeachment can be pulled and a more appropriate legislation can be put forward. The highlights that I've been made aware of, and we're going to probably go into more detail, is number one, SASM, any law enforcement agency should be able to utilize the things inside the armory. If there is agreements, transportations of, that can be done, you know, legally once this thing gets put forward. Yeah. But then the third is that and I agree with McAllister here, is that PMCs in general, and their operation there in the state of San Andreas, needs guidance and clarity. Give you an example. Even to this day, Darkstone, like that Operation Friday, right? They had Class 2 firearms, right, and other things. And right now, that's not exactly illegal, right?
We have not deputized them past the alleged weapons trafficking incident.
Right.
They have been operating completely out of scope.
Yeah. Now,
so yes, I do agree that a PMC bill should be put forward. It's also making our job significantly harder to conduct, you know, law enforcement related business within San Andreas, because frankly, we don't know as to what the hell they're doing half the time until they're already midway through doing it.
Yeah, they have been good about it lately.
They have been.
The day of that jammer situation, they 311 made it very clear what they were doing. Yes. They gave us remember that shit show day, Oxby, where there was just stirring on the wrong, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Yeah. That was them testing signal jammers against the entities.
Got it.
Yeah.
This isn't us seeking to punish them. It's us seeking guidance and clarification on how they.
Okay. We since everyone's here, let's go inside just so we don't get kidnapped.
Or shot by locals
All right.
and stuff. Yeah.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
They're going inside.
Hey, what if Oxby, and Maxwell, don't feel like whatever we end up agreeing with should not, go up to Frost and Pred and company. That can, let's get these guys on the same page and then make sure we're good with it too. But I think our differences are probably going to be minor, relatively speaking. Sure. Where is how about this room over here?
Who picked this place tonight? Jesus.
What do you mean? I did. Said neutral ground. I thought of an area and, it was like, fuck it, let's come up here. Yeah, it's a hospital.
Right.
Oh, my God.
Want to have the LSPD table right here?
We got to sit divided.
Yeah.
It's a power move. Divide and conquer.
Wait, are they coming over? Okay.
I have no idea.
I'm gonna be a little blunt here. Blunt is a complete dumb fuck. So there is a possibility this is gonna go sideways. McAllister is pretty sharp and wants to see improvement. Gunner originally had said he didn't have concerns, and now all of a sudden he does. So I'm
Listen,
gonna be.
I'm here for the show, Knight. I didn't clock off because I'm here for the show. All right, buddy.
Well, I want to underline why this is so important. There are things that have been put on a literal pause for a month because of this.
Oh, I'm aware.
Yeah, and that's not good for the state, right? And
especially when
so
you're using them.
I think there are valid concerns on every end. I'm sure we can find a middle ground. Or an understanding, let's call it. So.
Is Junior around or he's not coming?
No, I went to sleep. He's hammered.
Yeah.
I saw him yesterday. He got his little junior badge or something for the Neon Jungle.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
he's really letting his hair grow out. It's crazy.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna kind of provide some just a quick synopsis here. About a month ago, 6 weeks ago, God knows. Delta One, prime operator of Darkstone, was placed under arrest, interrogated, and a lot of questions were brought up, including but not limited to. But what was effectively put out there was that we had no legal grounds to allow them to operate, including but not limited to the weapons that were moved, alongside any operations past and present. Now, given this incident, guidance was sought from the powers that be, and the powers that be made it rather clear that legislation needed to be put forward to provide these clarities. Makes sense, right? From the POV of numerous members of law enforcement, command, high command, etc., we were being put in very awkward positions, for lack of a better way of putting it, where a PMC is doing all kinds of shit, which by letter of the law, by spirit of the law, would be perceived as not only illegal, but potentially operating with them could be seen as treasonous. Now, I don't particularly want to get into the pedantics of it, since shit happened. How do we move forward? We need them, let's just say. However, that need should not supersede us giving away our autonomy, right? For all we know, they're from China or some shit, you know what I mean? And their plan is to take out the faceless and then take their assets and now run our damn government, right? So this kind of puts us in a position where it's like, okay, well, let's find a middle ground, right? Call it a trade agreement, where they can continue to, let's say, provide assistance when needed. They may continue to do things that perhaps do things that how do I put this? Do things in our interest and their interest, which is, basis related, or perhaps continue to provide us with other tools and utilities. Okay. So I have, after these conversations taken place, Mr. Rizal here, Mayor, he put forward a piece of legislation, the cap legislation. Subsequently, it was contested. I've spoken to both Mayor Rizal here in length, as well as McAllister here in length, and my professional opinion here is that I think there's just a misunderstanding as to where the agreement is, as to what is being sought, and I genuinely believe that we can reach a middle ground instead of going and bringing this to arbitration. Now the question may be, well, why not arbitration? Arbitration's great. However, when the differences are pretty extensive, I don't think that is going to be resolvable without a rewrite anyways, based on the conversation I had with McAllister. A lot of points I actually agree with. And that would be more conducive to us coming to a solution rather than, that get brought up, it get put to vote, damn city says no because they don't want us to have snipers or whatever bullshit might come up in their mind. Right. So what at the end of the phone call, McAllister and I had was the recommendation was, let's get some bullet points as to what the concerns are. And then we kind of address those one by one, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's the mayor, or whether it's y'all, and see if we can come to some of those compromises, get that rewrite in and send it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So
I just was getting briefed outside on some of those bullet points.
Great.
Whatever I can do to help once those points are agreed upon. They said something about me helping draft something. Whatever I can do to help, I'm happy.
Right.
To
so,
whatever you guys want. Whatever I can do.
Beautiful. And because I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Michael, but part of the concern, and I'd like us to go through the bullet points, is there is a desirability for a piece of legislation for how PMCs operate. In other words, let's say they need to do a mission, or they need to do a VIP transport, or whatever the hell it is that they're able to do so within the confines of, because there's the weapon question, right, where CAP comes in. But then there's that separate thing of, there is this PMC, or let's call it a third party organization. How do we agree to let them to operate? How do they notify us? Those sort of things should be codified so that tomorrow we don't have Hydra, protecting bank trucks on behalf of the PD, or
in their PMC or something. Yeah,
I will hold off on comment on that until we get to that point. So
Okay.
why don't we go through these bullet points in a logical and chronological manner, and address these concerns. And if we get to the point where we need to discuss a secondary piece of legislation, we could do that.
Okay. Easy.
Yeah, that works.
All right.
Good.
So you'd rather that I discuss the cap bill first? I've made points.
Yeah.
I think
Fantastic.
the second one doesn't exist without the first one. So let's
That works.
square one.
Could we
Right.
do you mind speaking up just a little bit?
Oh yeah, no, easy.
All right.
Okay, so what I will say is I do like certain portions of the current cap legislation, but because of the way the entire thing was structured, I found it easier to just, counter the entire thing versus specific sections. For example, I actually did like the portion where you specifically added in, as part of their duties, law enforcement officers will be issued a weapons license permitting use of approved police-issued firearms. I'm actually surprised that wasn't a thing beforehand. Frankly, that should have been a thing in there from day one. Not quite sure as to why it wasn't. Fantastic.
It was
work on that
implied,
part.
it just wasn't clarified.
It really should have been clarified.
Sure. I didn't write that law,
well,
though.
yeah, no, but you did well amending it.
Thank you. I appreciate the compliment.
No, you're all good. You're all good.
Yeah.
So Gunnar actually brought this point up to me a while ago. And this probably should be added in here. But there have been instances, either temporary or for a prolonged period of time, of which law enforcement in the past has had to use unserialized weaponry or equipment for that matter. We want to make it standardized that outside of police SOPs and some sort of legislative matter, that is logged somewhere.
Could you say that just one more time? Sorry, I missed the bullet point there.
So TLDR, unserialized firearms should be heavily regulated but registered within a report of the MDT if they are to be used in a law enforcement aspect.
Okay. Can I raise something here? Just for the sake of
Yeah.
understanding. One of the things I really don't like doing is broadening out the scope of a bill so it touches on, 100 different things. I try to keep it very, very narrow in scope. Otherwise, it overwhelms the public. So the reason I bring it up is I don't think it's a bad idea. But do you think now is the time to push this forward?
If you're already altering this specific piece of legislation, I would say yes, it is. Furthermore, as you mentioned, it's the general public. This part would only really affect law enforcement, and their job is to read case laws and
But
legislation.
law enforcement is a public service. So anything that affects law enforcement affects every citizen of San Andreas.
May I pause this real quick because I feel like I missed a piece here. Michael, could you describe what was the intent of the cap legislation? And this is good for May and everyone in the room, right? Like, what was the intent of it? What was it trying to solve? And I think
the capped bill is a narrow bill that amends the weapons and driver's license legislation to provide clarity around how police may procure weaponry and use said weaponry. So in this instance, it provided a framework for county law enforcement to receive the necessary approval to enter into a contractual agreement with a third party, in this case, a PMC, to procure weaponry that could then be lawfully owned, possessed, and used by county level law enforcement. That was it.
Okay. Understood. Okay.
Okay, so you don't want me to expand the scope on it all? So I can go into the main points if you'd like. But
No. It's not that I don't want you to expand the scope. It's that an avenue exists to bring stuff like this forward to the mayors, and we would have been happy to do that if we were engaged.
Hey,
frankly,
I'm going to pause this right there just real quick. So look, there are a lot of things that I want us to hold what happened beyond the start of this meeting, kind of in the past, because I think everyone in this room, I have problems with Maxwell. I got problems with Oxby. I don't know who you are there, Blunt. I think I met you once at the impeachment thing.
Yeah, I think once. Maybe
I was happy when McAllister punched Gunner in the face earlier on the phone call. McAllister and I don't always see eye to eye, and I haven't really met you too much there, Mr. Brazil. So, my point here is, like, some of these points are raised, like, you want to see SASM named in this bill, right?
That was one of the arguments, yes.
Okay.
And there are a few more dot points I need to get to before I get to that.
Yeah.
Please.
100%. And so what I want to tackle each one of these things one at a time so that we don't get too far ahead. We have a disagreement on like bullet point number 1, and we're on number 5. Do we have Mayor, do you have any issues with SASM being added to this?
Not at all.
Okay. Easy. All right.
So maybe I was a little confused based on what they were saying outside. Is it being added, mentioned in that it doesn't apply to SASM and the tools in their disposal, or that it's meant to cover them as well?
So it already doesn't apply to SASM, right? Because SASM are, I suppose, legislatively defined as law enforcement officers, right? They're part of the PD Leos Act. The PD Leos Act defines what a law enforcement officer is. It includes SASM under that umbrella, right? So the existing law already states that law enforcement officers, actually, you know what? I need to fact check myself before I say that. I need to look at, what is it? The weapons and driver's license legislation says that law enforcement officers can use weaponry that can be attained from their department's specialized armory, right? It's something along those lines. It doesn't say the LSPD and the BCSO can use weapons from their specialized armory. It says law enforcement officers, which means the law as it stands right now includes everyone.
So, okay.
I believe the amended version refers to the LSPD and the BCSO specifically, right?
Yeah,
It is not currently. It explicitly says law enforcement officers.
Then it would apply to everyone.
I
Right?
believe the contention may have been, where to say, relevant law enforcement department head.
Sure.
And
in parentheses, I believe it says the sheriff and the chief, right? But
correct.
that doesn't necessarily mean it's exclusive to those two. Law enforcement department head would be the head of any law enforcement department. A law enforcement department is already legislatively defined, right?
Yeah.
We know that there are SASM, LSPD, BCSO, and I actually believe the DOC is defined as law enforcement officer. So would it include them too?
Well, I think maybe so. I want to make sure this was that the where what the first bullet point was in reference to there, McAllister?
I haven't said the first bullet point in relation to that yet.
Oh, my apologies. Go ahead.
Should be involved. Well, I guess is the intent of that language to include SASM under the purview of the current bill?
It absolutely would. No, I mean it absolutely would, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't use generalized terms like law enforcement, right? I would use very pointed terms like specifically the LSPD and the BCSO. So, in that regard, it would apply. But if it's a matter of specificity, I'm happy to name the director of the Marshals and SASM explicitly. That's not a problem.
Yeah, I think.
I guess the question is, who would have oversight as to the tools or the weapons at the disposal? So, what I guess a concern that, frankly, I think the law enforcement department should have on their own, but certainly we'd have as the Marshals, or at least I would have, would be, a mayor or a set of mayors comes in and makes a determination that the Marshals are no longer authorized to have any of the the state issued equipment that they have been given.
Well, let's unpack that, because I think it's very interesting that you bring it up, right? To me, in my mind, there are a lot of constitutional provisions that exist that provide you in that fictional circumstance, right? God forbid it ever happens, but in that fictional circumstance, to contest that act by a future mayor to restrict the PDs, right? And I think that would very swiftly get struck down by a DOJ who says, no, mayor, you can't make it illegal for the LSPD and the BCSO and the Marshals to use Class 2s because it would endanger the entirety of the state and jeopardize people's constitutional right to safety, right? Does that kind of make sense?
I mean, you could file an authority conduct review or an impeachment and go through that process.
You could do that as well.
Contest that.
You could also contest the legislation before it passes.
Well, does it say that they have to legislate the changes, or does it just give them the authority to make that decision at will?
No.
Okay, so
this one specifically, it doesn't even let the mayor decide what the PDs can order from a PMC.
Wait, the patch is out.
If a PD is going to enter into a contractual agreement with a third party for weapons, the mayor should have an opportunity to sign off on it. At the end of the day, it's county money that's being used to purchase the weaponry, right?
Okay.
This doesn't give the mayor the power to look at the itinerary for a shipment and say, well, no, I don't think you need.
I'm locked in because I already know what the arguments are.
Let's strike those off, right?
Okay.
No, the intent is not that at all. It's if we're going to be engaging with third parties from overseas to bring weapons onto the shores of San Andreas, the government has a right to be involved in that process.
Okay. And then there's the relevant legislative authority, and then inherently that
who would be the Marshals,
LSMCO to LSPD,
I
county
think
mayor's office to the sheriff. Imagining that if the SASM was to enter into an agreement like this, that it would need the state's approval as a legislative with regard to SASM, or who would be the relevant legislative authority?
I'm going to speak candidly.
I still think applies to the DOC as well.
This is DOC as well, yes.
The
DOC wanted to contract for beanbag shotguns. Who's the quote-unquote relevant legislative authority?
I think the relevant one would be the state, to your point. My only concern with that is how sluggish the state can be at times.
Yeah, I
and
don't.
That's where, like, in my respectful opinion, the specific equipment that each department is equipped with should be left to the individual leading that department. It's in my opinion that
I do agree with that.
The director of the Marshals should be able to choose the equipment that they
I
acquire.
agree.
I don't think legislative authorities, frankly, should really have any say there, other than
the way
the
that I
fact
wrote
they,
it in
they
my
maintain the
notes
ultimate control of
was-
appointment
Right.
of who
Frankly,
leads that and makes that
like,
decision.
A legislative authority isn't necessarily going and checking on their police department every single day to go, hey, yeah, you can put these parts in your car. Yeah, you can do this with your budget. Yeah, you can do that with your budget.
Yep.
So why is that same thing being applied to the equipment of which they place in their armory?
Well, so I think they're and I want Michael and Marshals, correct me if I'm wrong here. Reading this and hearing both sides, the intent of this, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, is that we're talking about third-party vendors only, right?
Correct.
I think the language here, I can see it being confusing, in that it notes. Give me a sec here. I'm like tabbing in and out. So if this instead said equipment from a third-party vendor or supplier for which a contractual agreement is signed and authorized, blah, 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 I believe that might resolve a lot of this, right? Because they're part of the concern, and Marshals is where, tell me if I'm wrong here, is that if tomorrow Kale Soze finds a sniper rifle in the trooper's office and says, hey guys, do you want to use this? Cool, I'll load up your armory. We don't want to be restricted from that. And the language today makes it seem like that might be a restriction. Am I being accurate?
The mayors, the justices would get a vote as to like whether or not you're like,
right.
If the sheriff decides he wants you guys and your deputies to have a 6-shooter, and you want to add that, have a third-party company,
correct,
bring in a shipment of those for your armory for your deputies to
Whoa, hold on. I'm talking about a non-third party, right? Like like the
state.
Correct, right? Is that the concern, or Mr. Blunt? There, are you saying that if a third party comes in and says, "Marshals, do you want to use this new revolver?" You don't want the state to have oversight on that? Is that
no? I mean, the state, to the point, the state could have. There's likely to have some sluggish response with regard to if the legislative authority has the oversight. The mayor's office has, but so more so with regard to the state and SASM. But overall, but without getting into the specifics of the exact language, it's my opinion that the sheriff, the chief, the director of the SASM, those individuals should be responsible for choosing the equipment that they provision for their department.
The only issue
if
that
the sheriff decides whether it's the state that's providing them or a third-party contractor that he wants to spend $1 million of budget money to acquire 100 6-shooter, the revolvers for your deputies to carry, that's a decision that the sheriff should be able to make.
The issue here, and I'm going to take Rizel's, I'll lean more on Rizel on this, and consider the following, right? We are law enforcement, and we have to protect the state. If China comes here tomorrow and says, we got some weapons for you, we shouldn't be making that decision, right? And I'm using China because it's easier to relate than Darkstone because they've been on our side. So I can understand.
Why would the chief and the sheriff and the director of the marshals not be equipped to make that decision and make that judgment call based on the facts and the evidence presented to them?
Because we're not political entities, like outside of our, it's outside of our purview. You know what I mean?
Like when we get to things like this, I like to look to the Constitution, right? And when I look at the Constitution tells me that the mayors of both counties are responsible for public services. So can we at this table all agree that law enforcement is a public service?
Yep. I would agree with that.
Does anyone disagree with that?
That makes sense.
So why I think the mayor should have some level of ability to sign off, right? And again, I'm not saying the mayor should have to sign off on shipments. I'm not saying the mayor should have to flip through the catalog of weapons and pick what the PD can and can't use. I'm saying
China.
given that the PDs are a public service and public services are the responsibility of the elected officials of both counties, they should have a say.
It's
and a seat
easier
at
to
the
say
table
China
authorize
because
their
I think it's
department
easier to relate
enter
with the
into a
point.
contract with PMCs to bring weapons into our county.
But it's not just a seat at the table at the conversation. They have essentially unilateral veto power based on this structure, because if they do not sign off on the contract, it cannot be executed.
That's how government departments function.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's say, for example, with you guys are facing a prevalence of some new type of weapon out there, that there's something that you have an ability to bring in to counter. And the mayor that's in position is very
reluctant to play ball. Sure, I get where you're going. I get the picture that you're painting. And you're saying that the mayor stonewalls the procurement of the tools necessary to combat this threat, right?
correct.
Do you have tools to deal with that scenario in law?
Yes, but in stating that, I believe a lot of the concern was relayed in the fact that it could delay the process even further when they need those pieces of equipment and weapons.
I don't disagree.
I do have a
I don't
potential
disagree,
fix
right?
for this, if you don't mind.
Please.
As we've mentioned before, we've had a lot of chats about voting systems recently. You've all seen the Marshals. So instead of making it a chain of command type thing where you're first taking it to the mayor, then the chief, or then the DOJ, how about you just all have them vote? Majority wins.
So I feel like there's like a confusion about how this is working, and maybe that's on me for not being clear enough in the legislation, right? Let's say that this law passes.
Yeah.
The mayors work with the PDs and the Darkstone to sign off on a procurement agreement.
Yeah.
Whereby we effectively authorize Darkstone to sell wares to the LSPD and the BCSO if Junior so chooses. I don't see the mayor getting involved at any point beyond that, right? This is about authorizing a third party to effectively engage in the commerce of weapons with county police departments.
Okay, so then you're specifically referring to PMCs here.
Well, I under this scenario, yes.
So I think that might be addressed in the PMC bill I've got pointed later on, but I think that might address a lot of your points.
I believe
on this one,
if
I
believe what I mean. This, so, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, because I didn't realize this either until I got here. This legislation, the cap bill, is specifically about PMCs, which we're referring, or third parties, which we're referring to.
That's the intent, correct?
Okay, so, I personally, I do think the language gets a little confusing, because it's referred to as vendor or supplier, because our current, we do have a unspoken about, let's say, vendor and supplier for our current non-Darkstone equipment.
Sure.
And this legislation might muddy that water, right? So, which is kind of why I'm pointing at, what if it said more explicitly, if we are getting it from third party, whatever we want to call it, like, overseas, like Darkstone or whatever the hell, whatever that phraseology is, we're saying this is explicitly talking about Darkstone-esque, PMC-esque suppliers, and even to find out what third party means.
Wait, what if we called it a third party vendor or a non-government supplier? And then if we want to define that out further, I'm happy with that.
Because I do agree with the idea of, like, tomorrow we go to war, right? We need RPGs, and there is a supply chain for it, but it is government approved, right? That this situation would not apply, right?
Well, this is the thing, right? Let's paint a hypothetical picture here, because I think that'll make it easier to at least paint my vision on this. This bill passes. The mayor and the chief of police, let's say, they sign off on a contract between the LSPD and Darkstone, right? That then permits Darkstone to engage in commerce directly with the LSPD. Now, these filthy gangbangers of San Andreas, they get their hands on some class 3 weaponry. And it turns out that Darkstone can also offer weaponry that could allow the PD to match force. That would be a conversation between the chief of police and Darkstone, in my mind, in that, hey, we have this public safety need to procure this weaponry. You're an approved vendor. I'm going to reach out to you to purchase what I need, right? That's the way that I picture this working. It's not, oh God, I have to call the mayor up and this is going to be stuck in bureaucratic hell for 6 weeks. And by the time we get our RPGs, everyone's going to be fucking dead. That's not the way I see this going. So hopefully that kind of makes my interpretation of this clear.
And
so if it's a part of a pre-existing agreement, sure. But let's say that supply chain of that RPG in Brian's example is through a different supplier that's not yet approved. And then there's a line in here specifically that says, regardless of whether it's government issued or a third-party vendor, whatever, it explicitly states equipment purchased, taken possession of, or otherwise used in lieu of these approvals are considered to be unlawful.
Correct.
So if the state adds, the state vendor, all of a sudden tomorrow there's a new pistol in the armory, using that is unlawful until it goes through this approval process.
Well, and unless we add the provision, as Knight said, where it would then say equipment purchased, taken possession of, or otherwise used from a third-party vendor or non-government supplier in lieu of these approvals are to be considered unlawful, right?
Okay.
I'm happy to extend it to that.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. I'm not looking to obstruct the weight of the state weapon supplier, right?
Okay.
I think that's fucking brain dead.
Yeah.
To be honest, I would never try and do that. So adding that clarifying point, I think is important.
Okay,
so
well,
I think if ultimately if the chief and the sheriff are comfortable with ceding that that decision and giving the mayor the ability to add that sign off with regard to their procurement of weapons and making that lawful, etc. That's fine. I think from the perspective of the marshals, we would not like to be included under that. If there are equipment things that we have the ability to procure, I don't think we would like, and Gunnar, I'd like you to confirm this.
Yeah.
If this wants to be applicable to the LSPD and the BCSO, that's fine, but I don't think that this should be applicable to the SASM.
Think about some really tasty tacos.
Or the
right
DOC
now,
for
yes,
them,
I
though.
agree.
Or the DOC, yeah.
Some delicious tacos, by the way, Al Pastor.
Okay,
because it's unclear where this, like the legislative authority and giving the justices like the approval over. Apologies.
Okay, so
yeah, go ahead.
How do I unpack that? Because I don't necessarily disagree with you, but simultaneously the marshals aren't a legislative authority, but they are a state entity, right? Definitionally speaking, you're a member of you're a state government agency, right? Which means you are beholden to someone. But I also don't want you to be legislated in such a way that you're, again, stuck in bureaucratic hell because the state can't respond in a timely manner to a need, right?
Well, the reality is we're not really going to get anything
294 to PD
without that approval, right? That's just the reality of things.
Yeah.
I would be, and I think we'd be more comfortable, and I want Gunnar again to confirm that if this legislation were to specify that this is applicable to as the LSPD and the BCSO procurement process, and that it didn't apply in any way, shape, or form to the equipment that is procured, like it doesn't govern or cover BSASM or DOC.
So
I don't think we'd have any issue with the bill,
though, right? That would then restrict you from. Well, that would restrict you to only using weaponry from your specialized armory, right? So by including you, it provides you an avenue to engage with companies like Darkstone. So
I guess it's my opinion that the director at the moment has the direct authority to enter in those engagements on their own for SASM.
So here's I want to
covering it.
Philosophically,
the SASM legislation.
Let me ask a kind of a question here, because
yes, I agree with Mr. Blunt.
is if China came tomorrow. I like using the word China because, like I said, dark stone.
Boogeyman.
Like
as you
We
write.
know,
to a
you're
degree,
upset.
we.
I'm gonna throw it.
It's easier to talk about China. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
If China came and said, "Hey guys, we got these new guns," yeah, like it's doesn't it seem a little unreasonable that the Martians would be like, "All right, bet," you know what I mean?
I mean, there's no guarantee that they just say, all right, bet. But I think that decision is the director of the Marshals' decision to make. I don't think it's the mayor's or the justice's decision to make what equipment the SSM uses.
But would we? It would be the state's decision, right? Because they would, given that we're talking about contractual agreements, the Marshals making a contractual agreement with another country, what like with Hydra, right? Would also be. It's kind of a strange. It's a little strange, no? So, and at on the other end of the spectrum, you're that if you are, let's say, at the authority of the state, like the governor, the senators, whoever it might be, understandably they are hard to reach. Is there another mechanism that can be used to make it sensible, right?
And I kind of want to piggyback on that very, very, very quickly, right? Because I think this is relevant to the discussion. I sit here and I say nothing in law says that you have the power to do that. And your counterpoint is nothing in law says that the director of the Marshals can't do that, right? But we know from, recent engagements that the governor effectively said, I'm going to play devil's advocate and I'm going to say nothing in law implies this, that, and the other thing. And when he says things like that, and he says, my word is not law, he's pointing something out. He's pointing out that if you want something to be black and white and not open to interpretation, you need to legislate it. So your interpretation of the law and my interpretation of the law differ here, Blunt. And let's say you go out and procure something. That could still be obstructed because the law is not clear, right? I could be a petty motherfucker and I can go after you legislatively and judicially and make your life fucking miserable. And we can all laugh at each other on the docket like we're having fun. But if we take this opportunity to make it work in law for you and the Marshals, I think that's a W for everyone. You know what I mean? Now, I don't think that getting the highest level of state officials involved in this process is going to be of benefit to anyone. And I agree that the director of the Marshals should have some level of say. But politically speaking, someone in government needs to have some signing authority for a contract. I just don't know who that is for the Marshals, I guess is my point.
I think until that is clear, I don't know that we'd be comfortable submitting it to this process where it is the mayors and the government.
I get that entirely. I honestly, I think that's fair, right? Because I think a lot of people might go, well, we'll just make the DOJ the signing authority, but we know how that works, right?
Yeah,
The DOJ is beholden to the Marshals. That's not going to happen again.
Yeah.
And I don't want this to be some weird thing where it's like a panel of both mayors and the SAMA director. I think that doesn't make any sense. However, this is why
it's got to be completely independent. That's because you got to remember, like, and this is
look, I got a solution,
I'm not saying
guys.
This is likely this will happen, right? But let's say we're fighting a insurrection or rebellion that's led by one of the mayor's offices.
Sure.
And that's literally our job to stop an event like that from happening. And if we need some specialized equipment, a militarized attack chopper, and we can procure that through some manner, the idea that the mayors that we're fighting against are involved in that oversight process as to whether or not we can use that is crazy.
So
there has to be, for some avenue, whether the LSPD and BCSO, if they want to fall under this, that's fine.
Well,
but there
I
has
mean,
to be some avenue outside that structure that allows for the
like
procurement.
we got to be realistic here, right? If that were to happen, that would be a total collapse of democracy, and petty little laws like this wouldn't have any bearing, right? If you had to go out and get a fucking attack helicopter to take down a mayor, you're going to do it because the law is not going to matter at that point.
Right.
That's the
I mean,
collapse of civilization.
Though. The law does matter, and the actions that are taken, and somebody potentially being held criminally liable after the fact could happen if
But,
the
well,
law is not
I mean,
properly
No,
placed.
but that's part of the issue, right? Is that fundamentally speaking, these things are not legal, right? And this legislation aims to legalize them. It would be, and in the event, like, you're not wrong in that if you need things to protect the state, you need a mechanism for it. But in the same vein that a legislative authority or a law enforcement agency goes full-blown corrupt, right? Sanguine 2 starts up. Like BCSO, we start rebelling against the city, whatever it might be, and you need to step in. While that, you need a way to fight against that. But there's also the equal mirrored fact that the Marshals could do the same thing, right? Which is why it needs the check, right?
Well, don't take
that's
this the
where
wrong way, but
if that does happen, the state has the authority to just remove the director at any time. Like that, that's where the state would have to. That's where the state has authority over the department.
But that would be the same check. What if they don't check the emails and you guys have already taken over everything? You know, you get what I'm saying? So, like,
listen,
we're between a rock and a hard place, and the question becomes, what is the middle ground, right?
Well, this is why I hate the Marshals. They have an incredibly important mandate. It's just impossible to establish any level of oversight. And it makes it really, and when I say I hate the Marshals, it's not like I hate you guys individually. It's nothing like that. I love the concept of the Marshals. I love the mandate of the Marshals. It's just really, really hard to legislate around. Because if you don't legislate anything, I mean, to Knight's point here, right? It's basically the Wild West. You guys can do whatever the fuck you want, and that's not good for anyone, right?
I mean,
but when we try to put in oversight mechanisms, it's to your point, Blunt. While we can't have the DOJ do it, we've already done that. We know how that works out, and it doesn't.
Can I ask a question? Can we not just say a member of the state must just say okay?
Yeah, like the state, but I mean that's the kind of the reality, Brian. It's like, do you really think we're gonna get anything without that? Okay.
If you vote for Brian Knott for director, I don't think there will be an issue. Like I do, you know, because like
the point is like in all reality, we're not getting anything the state doesn't want us to have.
Yeah, but that's from the.
But why not have that check?
Armory, right?
Like genuinely, why not have it? The state, like, literally you must get a okay bet. You know, like that's it. Like I don't is because.
I think who those.
It's not like the state don't respond. They respond pretty often. You know what I mean?
Let me pose a question here quick. Okay. Let's say this passes through, right? And it includes the Marshals. Do you think it's within the ability of the leadership of the Marshals to let the state know that they're planning on engaging and signing a contract with Darkstone and they'd like the state's approval? Do you think that's within the realm of possibility? Because I think once that's signed, it provides you the same avenue as the LSPD and the BCSO. And that's kind of why I would rather include SASM, because it gives you guys an alternate pipeline to explore. Right?
Will they be the relevant legislative authority for SASM, but that it's still
No, we'd
also
have to
include them in
strike
I don't know, guys.
But
Like, because like I think we might be putting the bar too high here. Like
here,
we're not out.
Right?
It wouldn't be like
a mayor or a DOJ having oversight over the Marshals, because that doesn't make sense. But if the state is the oversight mechanism where they're effectively the signing authority on that contract for the Marshals, I think that is probably the happy middle ground here.
I agree, because like let me pose something, right? Like look, I paid attention to the docket and shit. Obviously, the state ain't trying to come through and fucking, like, with all due respect, read all the legislative shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if it comes to, yo, dog, we need an RPG, and they literally just need to say yes to it, there ain't no way you're not going to get a response to that rather quickly. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because that's
I think
we're not. It wouldn't require much of a reading, right? It wouldn't require much of a response. You just need a I bet. You know what I mean? And
I also think, based on the outcome of the director election, there's likely to be edits to the Marshals legislation that are driven forward by, whoever the ultimate director ends up being. I personally believe that the Marshals equipment procurement and approval and all that should probably just be covered under the Marshals legislation. And that for expediency purposes, you can continue with this legislation and we can withdraw the contest if it were to apply to LSPD and BCSO for now. And then with that, the new director in place, if it, the decision is made that it makes more sense to slot it in under this legislation as opposed to the Marshals legislation. And the same applies for DOC as well, because we got to keep DOC grouped in. They are ultimately under the same kind of purview that we are.
Yeah.
That we can make the decision to either add them in here with the approval process of the state representative or whatever we can come up that makes sense, and maybe get some input there from them as well as to what they'd like to see with regard to that.
Do you think the DOC should be defined in law as law enforcement officers?
Yes.
You do. Okay.
Yes.
with limited capacity, more.
With limited jurisdictional authority to the prison, and then they act as a sub authority to the local law enforcement agencies when they're out in the field. If let's say they're involved in, and this is something that they want to look at potentially adding.
There has to be a lot of care and thought put into when we start going down this road, because I'm just gonna elephant in the room. Our shit ain't that developed. And the further any of us go down the rabbit hole of what is law enforcement, there ain't legislative backing for the majority of that, because in the writing there is implicit common sense applied, right? Am I making sense here? What I mean by that?
Yeah.
Like, we do not fully expand out a detention. We don't fully expand out X, Y, and Z. And
gaps the previous mayor should have fixed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like I said, it's something they want to add in terms of their legislative stuff. With like acting in parole operations in the field outside of the prison.
Yeah.
But for the purposes of within the prison, they are law enforcement officers. They do enforce the law, and they can
right. I'm pointing out, like, we want to be careful not
honestly,
to expand
it was
the scope.
It was just a very quick question that kind of piqued my interest for something.
Yeah.
We don't need to
Okay, thank God. Okay.
No.
Connor, I thought you were munching on tacos there, pal.
Am I hearing correctly? And I want to bring us back to where I think we're at, and please tell me if this is inaccurate. The desire here is that the capital legislation specifically be in regards to the LSPD and the BCSO. And then the Marshal legislation be expanded to be similar, with the authorizing entity being the state.
Correct.
Okay,
and
but
that procurement process just getting defined out, or like I said, ultimately, if with the legislative changes in whatever the ultimate director decides to be making or be pushing for,
so
if it makes sense to slot it into this bill or into this law at that time with the appropriate authorities, and that's fine too.
Let's say that is the route that is taken, right? There is a dangerous door here, which is how quickly can that be done? Could we get some tomorrow?
In the meantime, the SASM would continue to operate as they already have until that point where the legislation changes with regard to SASM. This would just be with regard to how LSPD and BCSO were to acquire weapons and the approval process they need to go through to achieve that.
My understanding, having attempted to arrange a meeting with Darkstone, the mayor's legislative authorities, so that we don't get stuck, is that it is currently illegal to be utilizing some of these things or procuring stuff. If next week, end of this week, there's some vital equipment that is needed by the state, LSPD would have and BCSO would have a means to advance that mission to goal, right, to acquire those things but you guys wouldn't have an avenue anymore, right?
So I
Wouldn't
guess
you
that's
want
where we
that
disagree,
avenue?
because where it's very clearly said, the acquisition of the weapons that did already take place. And the question was posed, where was the notification to the legislative authority? Where was any of that? And the response was very clear. Where is it mandated that they must? It is not.
Could you point me at that just real quick?
The director has the authority to acquire weapons for this department.
This is in regards to the docket posting. It was a back and forth between myself and the governor. And the
Which
governor,
one in particular? Sorry, just so I can reference it.
I'm going to have to remind myself.
Oh, good.
This could be on the docket for the injunction, I believe.
No, it was City Hall closed. And I think it was it on the... No, it's not closed. It's still open. It is the formal request for referendum. Is it that one?
Okay.
No, this isn't long enough.
I presume it was the writ of prohibition.
Might have been
Yes,
that
it's
one.
enclosed in the writ of prohibition.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
The closed writ of prohibition.
What's
Under,
the
Department of
thread number?
Justice. I got you. Hold on. Jesus, it was that long ago, huh?
That's crazy. Yeah, so
And the
entered
nominations really
into
did take long.
dealings with a private military company, Darkstone, without authority or legislative approval. The response from the governor: nothing implies they must. So as it stands, the director has the authority to enter into dealings with the companies and make these acquisitions as it stands, without any changes to any legislation. He said, if you want to add these restrictions because the SASM has that language in its legislation now that says that we may be procured with these items, etc. LSPD BCSO does not. So like I said, if you want to push forward this legislation to specify for LSPD and BCSO, and the chief and the sheriff are
Didn't it
comfortable
authorize
with
the
ceding that
deputization
authority
procurement
and
of the
not having it be
oath
with them,
taking?
but with the mayors, then that's
Okay.
perfectly fine. We can withdraw our contest as long as it's made clear that it applies to the LSPD BCSO and not the SASM.
Can you
I want to clarify.
wait?
because
It doesn't
feel
say
like
that
we
though.
can't leave this part out because I think it's important. So everyone in the room needs to know that entire exchange, right? Concluded with the governor saying, I would suggest rewriting the unclear parts of law so it makes sense to the people. Nothing I have said is the law, just that we wouldn't act on it as it is written. Well, he says as it is. What he's implying is we wouldn't act on it as it's currently written, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we're effectively doing is making an effort to clarify the law, as the governor said. But if the interpretation of the law enforcement department, so like Knight here, who interprets it as currently being illegal, or the LSPD, who generally speaking, Oxby, Maxwell, feel free to chime in, but the general understanding from the LSPD is how those weapons were procured presently, and the use of those weapons would be illegal. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
So if SASM is operating in the jurisdiction of Los Santos County,
Okay, I can cut the cord here.
Please.
I'm just gonna shoot as straight as I can, because when I arranged this meeting, it originally started with look, we're in a gray area, right?
Agreed.
My understanding is either the governor or the secretary to the governor, in the question of the direct question of which was in regards to weapons, it should be in the Constitution or in legislation. So I believe that this reading, and I don't think we should be parsing too heavily on what is stated on here, there should be something. The absence of does not inherently make something legal. Everything in law is fundamentally derived from the Constitution, with legislation being clarity points. Given the weapons we have today, the statements that I'm reading here and what I'm looking at on my phone here does not infer that those weapons are legal. It just means we may have gotten away with it. You know what I mean? And
so that's again, That's my interpretation, and that's why I'm trying to clarify these unclear or unwritten parts of the law, right?
And I'm not saying that they should not be clarified. Let me be clear.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it should remain what it is. I'm just saying that clarification, there's some more gelling we need to do, I think, with regard to the approval process in the state and the representatives and who and how that would work and whatnot. And so I think that is better to cook on and put into the list of changes that would need to come not to the Marshals legislation, and frankly, probably a constitutional amendment as well, given that when the DOJ,
what the fuck is he saying?
SASM was removed from the DOJ, rather than separating out the SASM in the Constitution, the DOJ removed them from the Constitution entirely.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a constitutional amendment that gives the state, enumerates the state as a legislative authority, because they come in, they make changes to particular parts of legislation. Technically, it's not backed anywhere. I think the Constitution needs to enumerate the governor's office or the state as a legislative authority, and these departments under that state's authority, just like the LSPD and the BCSO are enumerated in the Constitution under the mayor's the legislative authority.
So I before Brian interjected, and rightfully so, I just wanted to finish painting the picture of where I was going, right?
Please.
So we choose not to incorporate SASM in this amendment to the legislation, pending the appointment of a permanent director and their opinion on how this needs to be legislated. We end up in this position where we're relying on the existing legislation, which is effectively non-existent for how the marshals may procure weapons. And if it's the interpretation of the LSPD or the BCSO that how those weapons were procured was illegal, and a marshal is operating within the jurisdiction of Los Santos County, they would be within their right to arrest a marshal.
That's exactly my concern.
I mean, our legislation very clearly states, though, that we can be provisioned with equipment that is outside normal law. Like our legislation is very clear that we are authorized to do so. I understand that there might be concern as to whether or not the LSPD or the BCSO is authorized to carry those weapons. But there can be no doubt, based on the Marshals legislation, that the Marshals are authorized to.
I agree, but what makes that piece of legislation jurisdictionally higher, or what makes it supersede the other one, which says law enforcement officers may use weapon from their specialized armory?
Could you point me their blunt, specifically what you're citing there, just so I look. Sorry about that.
Oh,
yeah. Aren't you married?
In the San Andreas State Marshals legislation, it's the last sentence in Section 1.
Yeah.
Sorry, say that one more time.
Yeah. San Andreas State Marshals and Correctional Officers legislation. It's the last sentence of Section 1.
The SASM, it's Section 1. The SSM may be provisioned with specialized and non-standard law enforcement equipment. Gentlemen, I think that's very clearly not referencing third parties. So this SM may be provisioned with specialized and non-standard law enforcement equipment. This is very clearly not referencing a third party. You know what I mean? We could.
So I mean, if the director were to provision that equipment, I guess how would that be illegal? Under what law would you charge them?
The plain reading of this, the SASM may be provisioned with specialized and non-standard law enforcement equipment to fulfill their mandate of protecting the Constitution against terrorist and any threats fundamental. Yeah, they may be provisioned with. This is the state may provision it. The the guy at the armory might, find like a, some kind of device. He may, the state kicks him in the, your valet, and, all of a sudden you got like a phone listening van in there, right? That's what the plain reading of this is, not the third party is providing you with weapons.
You're saying you're assuming the provision must be from the state, but it does not say that.
My interpretation there is the fact that it says non-standard law enforcement equipment. It's clearly, I think anything coming from the state would be considered standard law enforcement equipment.
Well, not necessarily. Would you consider APCs to be
sniper? Yeah, that's my point. Regardless of where they're provisioned from, it does not say that it's only if it's provisioned by the state.
That's
the
problem,
idea
yeah,
that the
it's not-
director does not have
Generally
the authority
speaking-
to provision equipment and that it's a criminal act to do so would be that you have no justification
So,
statute to charge a marshal under.
Let's bring it full circle. The marshals are a state entity, right? Their mandate is effectively a mandate that's been legislated. I'm assuming we agree on that, right?
Mhm.
So when we look at this legislation, and again, it doesn't explicitly say anything, but I'd
Bro,
like to
there's no
unpack
way
this.
you can read it that
says,
way.
As Nate says,
What the
they may
fuck?
be provisioned with. If they're a government agency, right? Logically speaking, where would they be supplied from? Would it be from the government who establishes their mandate and their very existence? Or would it be every Tom, Dick, and Harry parading around as a PMC trying to peddle weapons?
It depends. It depends on the equipment, the purpose, the specifics of that particular procurement. There's so many different aspects that could go into that. And ultimately, without any further guidance or legislation on it, that discretion is left to the director of the department.
There's an issue here, and I think this is maybe what the concern might be getting missed. It may be the belief of the other law enforcement agencies that the plain reading of this is not in regards to Hydra, China, Darkstone, etc., but rather the plain reading of this is by nature of where the document is scoped and what a reasonable person with a bar license would interpret this with. I'm not saying that you're not, but I'm just saying like that's the position. We then get in this.
The one time it's been questioned was with regard to a third-party contractor, the Darkstone stuff that was brought up. And like I said, it was specifically mentioned when it said that the marshals did this without the authority to do so. It was specified that nothing implies that they must seek that authority from the legislative authorities to do so.
But it was
Inherently, meaning
also
they have the authority to do it currently, unless something changes to modify
Nate.
that.
Go
I think
ahead,
something
Nate.
should change to modify that. I think the marshals legislation should get updated accordingly. I don't think doing that right now under this process with this bill is necessarily the best idea.
we agree.
Without that clarity.
Sorry, we agree with that. My question, what spawned this conversation was, can we get that within the next 24 hours? Because if next week, because I don't want, look, let me just be shooting straight. This shit should have been done 3 weeks ago. I don't, there was probably a million different reasons why the process was slowed down. Your concerns are valid and reasonable, right?
I don't want to cut you out. I do apologize. But Gunnar, please correct me if I'm wrong. There were provisions and suggestions put forward with regard to these things, and you were told to wait until after the new director was selected. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So a lot of these
Wait,
things
sorry,
were
say again?
addressed in following the impeachment. There were drafts of changes to legislation that I believe were submitted to the state, and Gunnar can give some more clarity here potentially. And the response to that was basically hold off on any changes until the director stuff is done. Then we'll talk about it.
Yes, that's pretty much the extent of the communication I received. Yeah.
So that is why there has been a pause.
Okay,
Don't
so-
think that we're
so,
just like,
okay.
oh yeah, nothing needs to change. Everything's fine. Everything's just wait until there's a new director.
Wait, so, oh my God. Okay, so you're just gonna, okay, so wait, then none of this is really even an issue then.
That's what I'm saying. Just take the capped bill, make it specifically LSPD BCSO. Have it address those concerns so that there is a process for them to acquire the
Brother,
weapons.
why
And
wasn't
like I said,
this said
personally,
before?
And this is not on behalf of the marshals. This is my personal opinion.
Uh-huh.
I think the chief and the sheriff should want to maintain that kind of control of their department as opposed to cede that to the mayors. But if they make the decision that they're on board with it, that is entirely within their purview. And if that bill wants to proceed with LSPD BCSO, fantastic. Marshals will be covered under the marshal legislation. Get that change after the director is in.
I want to be very clear, actually, of what that statement means, and I'm just going to put this on the table, right? Until those things are done, the rest of law enforcement is put in a very awkward position, just like Darkstone was awkward for us looking at it from the outside, right? Like, who the fuck are these people? They're giving us guns, et cetera, right? where there is a question mark, which is debatable, which I don't want us to be testing the waters of whether or not it's illegal or not, bringing it to court and all that bullshit, right? Which is fundamentally why we want legislation put forward, so that it's clear to everybody that there's a legal way to do it, right? Is my understanding correct? Is that you were told by the state gunner that things, including the topic of procuring weapons, should wait until after the next director is picked?
Not necessarily including the procurement of weapons, but a draft of a version of legislation that we wanted to be put forward. We were told to hold off on anything, including the constitutional amendments that would enumerate SASM into the Constitution.
So that makes sense, right? I don't want to, I'm being careful here, and I'm put y'all on the spot, right? And because it's very important to me, and I think the rest of us in the room, is that the things you were told to wait on, did it include this particular slice of a topic or no?
Well, no, it did not include this particular size.
Okay, so then we shouldn't basket it with with this then.
Well, that, I guess this particular topic is touched on in the draft of that legislation that was proposed. And my point was the whole thing was put on pause, and that's why I think the way the stuff, the Marshall stuff happens in the Marshals legislation is the most appropriate spot for it. Especially with the question marks that we still have about state representatives, what that process would look like in terms of getting an approval from them as a legislative authority, the justices, etc.
Okay.
Again, I understand that you think that, and I guess I don't understand necessarily where, based on the governor's wording specifically there, that says that there is nothing in law that implies that they must seek approval to enter into these agreements. It is clear as day written there how there's,
because in the same breath I also
carry that weapon.
Because in the same breath, I also have a note here saying that we need something in law. So
I guess that's not what I'm just going based off what I'm seeing on the docket. And I'm not saying that there doesn't need to be a law that covers it. That's not the argument. Please, I want to make very clear. I believe the state should have the oversight as to whether or not we get these weapons. I think enumerating that in the exact process of the state representatives and their involvement and the process of requesting that, and potentially a timer on it where if it goes by with no response for a certain period of time, something, I think all that can get fleshed out. But I don't think doing it in this bill, whereas it's going to be a completely separate process for this versus the LSPD BCSO, whereas you have the process pretty cleared down for LSPD BCSO, to proceed with it in this bill under that guise at this time, and then do the Marshall stuff under the Marshall bill.
So
which is not going to be that long. I mean, the director's stuff is over on Monday.
It's around the corner. It's around the corner.
Yeah,
So,
okay. All right.
I just want to paint a picture because I feel like we're going in circles and saying the same thing over and over again. I want to paint a picture, and I want this to be at least said so it's understood, right? I understand what your interpretation is. I also know, generally speaking, what the LSPD's interpretation is. And I want to paint the picture that there is a very, very real possibility that if a marshal uses weaponry procured from a third party, that they could be arrested. And these gaps in law that we're arguing over could be clarified through a judicial proceeding in case law. That is a very real
be charged under, I guess, that's where
weapons trafficking.
How would one specific marshal carrying one specific class 2 bearing the Darkstone emblem?
Because we do not have law stating whether or not the San Andreas State Marshal's legislation is legislatively superior to the PD Leos Act or the Weapons and Driver's Licenses Act, which state that law enforcement officers generally, right, not specific departments, law enforcement officers, as universally defined, may only use equipment from their specialized armory.
Okay. Counterpoint, it's currently in my specialized armory.
Okay, but that would then necessitate us generally accepting that I could get a raging hard on, walk into the armory, and now the marshals could use it as a weapon. It being in that room doesn't make it.
Well, no,
is there?
Because the state had to specifically admit it into our armory.
Reading of that is exactly what it says.
So may I hear? This is kind of, I think maybe this is the bit that might be getting missed here. We believe that there are legal grounds on both ends of the spectrum, right? and we are trying to prevent these things. It would be valuable to have a interim piece of legislation that does not put the rest of the police departments having to question this to begin with. And so while there is a greater effort that I agree needs to be done, and there could be a more full-breathed way of like changing the Constitution, this, that, and the third, you know, is there a way, can we get a temporary provision in place where it's as simple as, like, if the state approves the weapon, y'all can use the weapon. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that's what we were kind of getting at earlier. For us to admit anything behind the locked walls of our armory, we need to get state approval already.
No one wants to debate, bro. This is the problem.
Armory, they already
like, I don't think that's what's being misunderstood. This isn't a courtroom.
We actually got the weapons after the rest of the LEOs did. So that's why I'm kind of confused when people are telling me that I'm actively weapons trafficking every day. You know, because the weapons trafficking charge
itself... There's
itself...
no way to bring that charge in good faith, realistically.
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense.
Because if you read the specific description, it specifically states the unlawful transportation of a large quantity of any firearm, regardless of, you know... I'll pause it there. I myself am not weapons trafficking. How are you going
so
to
neither
charge
is
me with weapons
90% of
trafficking?
the department, but they're not using them.
Yeah.
Yes, but that's a matter of personal preference. That's not a matter of something that's stated by law.
We have to keep in mind, right, is that legislation exists for clarity, right? And things are brought to court in the same way arrests are made, in which there is a belief that a crime has taken place. As with all laws, going all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States, the great United States, there are different interpretations of what things mean, right? What sentences mean and whatnot. And ultimately, it is the authority of the judge, justice, or wherever that, you know, all the way up to the Supreme Court to make a decision. What this provision does, the cap legislation, as well as what we're recommending here as a temporary piece of legislation, is to drive that clarity in such plain English that that question does not come up or need to even be considered on anyone's mind, right? There is a perfect way to do it, right? Constitutional change, put this thing here, et cetera, et cetera. But it would behoove everyone for there to be something temporary put in place so that if Darkstone next week needs, we need to work with them on something, and they need to give us something, we don't have LSPD and BCSO, myself, anyone really being like, hey, can the marshals participate in this? You know?
And that's kind of the point.
Or should they have that, right?
It doesn't really matter what my interpretation is or what your interpretation is. If a law enforcement officer in the moment interprets the law,
I'm trying to dumb it down as much as I
they
can.
think it does, and they decide to arrest a marshal, your interpretation doesn't matter. The judge's interpretation is going to matter at that point. And that's the picture I wanted to paint, right? Without a provision, it is a very, very real possibility that that picture that I painted could happen, because there is a gap in the law, because it is unclear and it's open to interpretation, right? You have your opinion, but it is not a universally shared opinion or interpretation of the law.
I understand that. I think the governor's word is very clear in what was written there. If
the governor said his word is not
officer
law. He said his word is not law. And he said that as
his
the law
word
was written,
there
he
is
wouldn't
no
act on
law
it.
that implies they must seek approval.
Agreed.
Inherently implies there is no approval process that needs to be sought.
By the same turn of the coin, though, right? There is no law that says they must not. It goes both ways, which means it's open to interpretation.
If something's not written in law that it's illegal, you can't charge somebody criminally with it.
If a law enforcement officer interprets the spirit of the law to mean such, they absolutely can.
I guess then that would be a wild interpretation, but if they wanted to do so, I guess they would be so.
They could. Absolutely. Right. That's my point, right? So when we leave ambiguity in the law, it opens you up to that uncomfortable situation. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just we have an opportunity to clarify this now. I'd rather do it. If you don't want to, that's fine.
Keep in mind, we would not be here today if we had something in place 3 months ago when it should have existed. I want to remind us collectively that because of that lack of clarity, discussions were had to get law in place from the guidance of the state. I'm going to say it again. The guidance from the state was that we get something written down. Now, and if it wasn't specific to what Gunner was instructed, then we should get that resolution sooner than later. Otherwise, it's going to get real awkward for a lot of folks, and the shit's going to continue to be put on pause for God knows how long, right? So,
yeah, I mean, I'm talking about just in the Marshall legislation as early as like next week is to given the director's going to be in on Monday. Want to make sure that obviously the things that are pushed are in line with what the director wants it to be, in line with what Gunnar was told.
Okay.
And if a law enforcement officer wants to take the wild, just ignore the Marshals legislation, ignore what the governor said, try to charge somebody based on the weapons legislation alone, charging a marshal with a weapons trafficking for carrying a single firearm, which does not meet that definition whatsoever, then
shit. I don't think he understands how the law works. Is the problem here is like we are trying to, I don't think he's understanding that his opinion is not final.
But like I said, if somebody wants to be petty and go do it, then I guess they could technically.
So I don't like throwing around the words reasonable and petty because I really don't think that's fair. At the end of the day, there's nothing in our law that says one piece of legislation is legislatively superior to another unless it's from the state directly, right? So for you to say to ignore this and only look at that, if it's the interpretation of the law enforcement officer that a crime has been committed, they're going to push it, and it's up to the judges or justices overseeing the trial to determine whether or not they think a piece of legislation is judicially superior, legislatively superior, right? So I don't like calling it petty because I think it is a fair assessment that there could be a good faith interpretation of the law that something criminal would be happening, right? I don't think the intent of the marshals. I don't think the intent of the marshals is to commit a crime. And I do think the marshals are attempting to act in good faith, right? But at the end of the day, there is ambiguity in the law and it could be interpreted as such. And I don't think that's being...
His arguments are very McDonald's. I don't know how else to like underline this.
Clear, though, we're talking about the criminal charge of weapons trafficking. A plain reading of that law, the unlawful transportation.
Well, no, I mean,
like there's nothing in here that carrying one of these firearms is weapons trafficking.
But you're, are there charges about, let's say, unlawful use of a class 2, right? We have charges around weaponry like that, right?
Possession charges of a class 2 firearm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's
But
I want us to bring us back.
Right?
You notice how there's a debate in here? Hence the need for legislation.
Yeah. That's
right?
my point.
Again, I'm not disagreeing that there needs to be legislation change. Well, I think the law is clear as it is. I think it could be cleared further, but it should be in the Marshals legislation.
It sounds like that right now, if this legislation is strictly for LSPD and BCSO, y'all are open to retracting it. Am I correct in saying so?
Gunnar, is that correct? That was my understanding of what I was briefed. Again, I brought in this conversation not 30 minutes ago.
I was going to say, I would like a few little words, just amended there if possible, like assuming there's some pieces of clarification. But yeah, that sounds more than reasonable.
Okay.
Okay. Please, yeah. What words do you want clarified?
Sure.
Please?
Okay, so when you're putting this bill forward, you specifically mentioned, firearms a lot. Like that was the goal of the bill, is to fix and amend how they introduce firearms into the armory, correct?
Correct.
So, where is the specific line? Give me a second here. You specifically mention in Article 6, Section A, Part 2, equipment from a vendor or supplier for which a contractual arrangement is signed and authorized by the. I was just wondering if we get that updated to specifically say like firearm suppliers instead of equipment, because obviously you don't have to sign it. The next time a brand new screw comes out for the cordless impact drill, right?
What if there's like some bionic arm or something?
That would be sick as shit.
It would be.
But in
It would be.
saying that, is like, do you really want to have to sign for, like bionic arms and new drills and like that?
The problem is, Blunt for some reason was the same thing with Wise.
And the justices too. Like
I love legal arguments. No one's trying to do that. We're just trying to make a way forward. This isn't a courtroom, right? What we're saying is like literally all that all we need to do is just be like, hey guys, here's how we can do this. That's it.
Straight up. Knight, Oxby, Maxwell, do you guys want them to have to sign for every single little thing, including like random tools, or
that's not what this is, though, right? It's signing off on a contractual agreement between the LSPD and a supplier.
Yep.
And once the contract is signed, what equipment they get isn't really my business. I wouldn't have to sign off on every drill and hammer.
Structured in a way that allows for like additional items to. So I guess if they've not talked to it. You sign a contract for.
Are you familiar with what a vendor of record is?
Yeah, but who agrees on the pricing and the items that are actually procured? Who is that left to? Is it just the chief and the sheriff?
That would be part of the contract, right? So whatever the chief and the mayor and the supplier negotiate would be the payment structure, right?
Right, and so ultimately that structure of that contract, the mayor could make one of the conditions there that each particular thing requires their approval. I'm not saying they will or that you're going to do that with them.
There's a lot of hypotheticals.
Gives you the ability to do that. That's
do you think I want to look through like 1,000 pages of spreadsheets where I go through each individual item? I hardly want to look at subsidy requests.
I think you're acting in good faith here. I'm thinking about the next mayor who is in a matter of weeks away potentially.
I'll speak on behalf of BCSO. I don't think we're too worried about what the mayor could or could not do when it comes to a sign off. And fundamentally, if Mr. Rozelle here or Junior Huntley did some dumb shit, they would be fucked in the ass really quickly by law enforcement. So I think all this really, for me, from my perspective, is that this is just providing an avenue by which we can acquire things from a third-party vendor. The only thing that I personally would like is a little bit of clarity instead of vendor. There, Mr. Rozelle, it says,
I've got in my
that it says like third
vendor, and
so it's clear that it's like a non-state government entity, right? Mm-hmm. And beyond that, I'm not too worried, because if that line does get crossed, if we enter into these other things, we can very quickly just get something changed and sent your way, right?
I think that if a mayor administratively obstructed a PD's ability to get equipment to do their job, they would be removed from office before I could say my raging hard-on is an approved weapon.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
That's fair. Yeah, I think that's fine. And like I said, ultimately, if you're comfortable with that, and the LSPD still want to go with that, I think there's a couple minor edits that have been pointed out that are probably going to benefit them. And like to what Brian said about making sure it's clear that it's not with regard to state provided weapons, but with regard to third parties specifically. I don't see any reason why at that point, if it's specified specifically to BCSO and LSPD, why we would need to continue the contest. I believe that could be withdrawn, but I'll let Gunner and McAllister.
Yes, I agree.
Why don't we go through the additional points you had, McAllister? You had a few more.
Fantastic. I had a few more.
Non-SSM-related ones,
yeah. So back to the original unserialized firearm thing that I was mentioning earlier. The reason that I'm bringing this up is because it was a specific point actually brought to me by Murray Falconer.
Okay.
He specifically came up to me and Gunner Kane and he said, "Hey, could you guys just buy a bunch of rocket launchers off of the besties tomorrow and start using them?" And I mean, look, under the current legislation, yes, technically, I mean, if they were to somehow be entered into the armory, yes. But obviously we don't want that happening. And there have been instances before in which law enforcement have received unserialized weapons to use in their armory. We were just looking to tighten that down and just, say, hey, if unserialized firearms are being used by law enforcement, please make sure it is logged somewhere in a report. That is it.
So there's a problem with that, right? Because that's not the legislative change that needs to be made, or at least it's not the only one. An unserialized weapon might also be a weapon that is scratched off, right? Could it be interpreted as such?
It is, yes. So there have been instances before where the PD have received things in their armory,
right,
and they do not have a serial on them. They've been completely scratched off somewhat.
So unfortunately, that would then also necessitate an amendment to the penal code and the criminal code of San Andreas. It's not just a matter of simply saying, hey, we need to do this. And that's why I love the idea. I think it's a good addition, but I would rather do it through a separate bill.
Oh, 110%. I'm just, as we're going through these weapon related matters right now, I'm just making sure that's notated down for the next time. I don't care if it's in there right now.
Doing a mass overhaul of weapons legislation. So
I'm making sure that you guys are aware of that one. Yeah.
In that, I just noticed something. Criminal
Did you notice you
transaction of
passed
a
out?
firearm. Yeah.
Okay.
Criminal transaction firearm only has class 1.
It does.
Not illegal to transact a class 2 or a class 3 firearm.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's good.
The only other thing I had in relation to cap stuff, which isn't really in relation to the cap stuff.
Do you need food?
But still in relation, you are trying to update a lot of charges. I would recommend getting this one updated as well. It was, when I went to go and look over the criminal possession of government, like equipment, whatever charges, it specifically states that it is illegal to possess any government-owned or police-issued equipment without being on duty as a state employee or an approved person tagged within the MDT. My only concern with that was being on duty as a state employee is an incredibly large scope. Does that mean that a county clerk could theoretically carry a PD watch?
I've been holding back on trying to explain, guys, Darkstone RP has been effectively had to be put on pause,
the charge itself?
waiting for this thing. It already took way too fucking long.
Possession of a government, issued whatever.
Government issued equipment.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
And literally, we just want to not be in an awkward place where y'all are running around with random shit, and it looks and feels and is all these illegal things, and we're trying to remove this. Please, just for the fucking love of God, just say 3 lines that just say, if state says yes, can use gun. You know what I mean?
I don't think this is relevant to this conversation, but I'm going to unpack it.
It isn't, yes.
This thing is so short. It's so short.
I have a whole lot of notes here, both relevant to the cap stuff and not relevant to the cap stuff.
I think that, oh God, I'm going to talk about interpretation, and Blunt's going to call me out on this. If this penal code charge is interpreted that a county clerk could
I know. I almost want to say it out loud because the thing is, I set up the back and forth shit.
We're all fucked.
I have an idea that
I really hope so. Yeah. I'm just hoping to tighten that one up just a little bit more, just in case, because you never know if you're gonna have Moose Knuckles as a magistrate ever again.
Oh my God. That's a trigger word for me. Yeah. Let me look.
I think it's just fundamentally not understanding that we just need to write shit. That's it.
Where that says county clerks, can't possess.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not getting into huge debates.
Is there anything else?
Maybe this bill specific related.
Yeah. For the cap stuff, I think we're all good on that part, unless LSPD or BCSO have any more notes.
No, I think the cap stuff is good. From our end, like I said, if there are issues, concerns, we'll probably push them out.
Okay, then I'd like to present my amendments just so we're all on the same page walking away here, right? Article 6, Clause A, Subpoint 2, equipment from a third-party vendor or a non-government supplier, right? So we're adding the clarifying points, third-party and non-government. Point 1 is going to be revised to read the sheriff, BCSO in parentheses, or the chief of police, LSPD in parentheses, with subpoint 1 being SASM and DOC are excluded from this legislation.
Okay.
Pardon me, from this article. And I think that's the only one, because if SASM and DOC are excluded, then the relevant legislative authority line is accurate, right?
Correct.
CMO,
Yes.
DCMO, majority vote of the justices, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, Blunt, you guys happy with that one? Because I'm happy with that one.
Yeah,
Yep.
like I said, as long as the local law enforcement agency is fine with that, I don't see any reason why, from our perspective, we would need to object. To that. I've got my
both
personal
departments.
opinions, but that's not relevant.
Both departments were part of the drafting process and both signed off on it. So.
Ryan's first day, I'm firing him.
Was there anything in 3? Equipment purchased, taken possession of, or otherwise used in lieu of these approvals are to be considered unlawful.
No, I'm kidding.
I think if
I'm going to try to.
SASM is excluded from the article, I think that's probably fine as is, right?
No.
Oops. Oh, yeah. I would hope
I wouldn't
no
take that
confusion over
extreme,
point.
but I'd be a lot more
Well, I
like.
mean, the clarifying point says it's from the article.
These
entirely,
pedantic
so anything
arguments
Article 6
are
related wouldn't include SASM.
unnecessary and
Well, I think there's
uninteresting
just
to
the whole legislation
99.9%
There's
of people.
nothing really in the legislation
Well,
that applies
actually,
to SASM
The
or
problem
DCMO.
is this shit
Well, actually,
illegal.
I do
Fix
still think
illegal.
that Article A should still apply to the SASM.
Hypothetical
Yeah,
scenarios
yeah,
and all this
yeah.
shit
Yes.
is just
give
it.
me 1 second.
We're the ones who are suffering. Blunt's not dealing with these situations. He's just here to
There
argue.
should not be a single, person running around without, a weapons license.
We see it. We have to deal with it on a daily basis. We're the ones who have to respond to the shit. So when it happens and there's,
How do I
we're
word
having to
this
deal
then?
with it. That's what we're trying to solve here. Right?
SASM and DOC are excluded from subpoint. It's going to be Roman numeral II and III. Is that correct?
That's why I've conceded. Let the
yeah.
SASM believe that what they're doing is okay.
Sounds about right.
I don't think it's. I think it's derivationally very easy to point it at what those actions are very much illegal, and they're holding the pooch. They could have solved this themselves,
Easy.
like fucking the day of the impeachment.
SASM
They
and DOC are
didn't.
excluded from
Right?
6AI,
The way I'm looking at this
6AII.
is like this is like when you have a problem, you need to be a part of the solution. Where were they on 9/9?
good?
How does that actually work though?
Right?
So 6A is as part of
They
their
could have
duties law enforcement,
engaged
because
in this
6AI
a month ago,
is
but
just
they
the
chose not
definition
to.
of police
So now
issued
to
firearms in
then
6A.
circumvent it, that's the problem.
Sorry, 6AII, not I.
It procured from it was permitting.
Could you just post it to City Hall there?
Well, I think he's getting the.
Oh, gotcha.
Trying to make sure it's
Before-
properly formatted
yeah.
before it's.
Yeah.
Do I
So
need to
it-
like help you off the floor, my dude?
It is
Oh, you
just
got this.
6AI with the 3 subpoints, 1 to 3, right? That's the section in question. 6A double I subpoints 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, I was just about to ask if somebody's got one.
I would love something to eat.
I'm very thirsty. My throat's getting a little scratchy here.
That's
Bubble
correct though,
tea.
right?
Um,
6AII, and then the subpoints 1, 2, and 3 under 6AII. That's that section entirely. 6 is good.
Yes.
A is good. III is good. It's just II. III.
How do you deal
Yeah.
with this all day?
I did it for 15 months. If one of you put 2 in the back of my head when I'm walking out, I will like send a postmortem thank you.
Okay.
All right.
okay. Fuck yeah.
Nice to know.
We're all good with it.
I believe so.
I believe so.
Okay.
To me.
I need I have now that's all sorted. We're gonna pull the contest. I presume, right?
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
so
post
he'll
up
post
the amendment.
Yeah, and then yeah.
Okay,
we'll,
beautiful. This is a follow-up. So my understanding, as per this meeting, is that after the marshal director has been chosen, whomever that may be, that at that stage we're going to get all these other provisions, right? The extra legislation, the constitutional changes, et cetera, has
Yeah,
that
I
already
believe,
been
yeah.
written?
Yes.
There is a draft of that, yes.
Okay.
But I'm saying the draft that would be put forward for ultimate review would be subject to
Different,
input from the director, right?
Understood. is that something that that will be okay? All right. And how long ago was that written? Was that a while ago? This is back during the impeachment thing?
It was pretty much immediately following the impeachment.
Understood. And these weapon provisions that we're discussing, is that something that was tackled in the draft that currently exists?
I have to go back and look. It's been, I'll be honest, a couple weeks since I've read it.
Okay. Understood. All right. Now,
if it's not, then it should be. I see the point of it being addressed, and it makes sense for it to be.
Okay.
I believe it was, but I gotta confirm.
All right. Fantastic. Okay.
Just
Well,
really quickly before we continue, does anyone happen to have anything to eat?
I got a glizzy here.
Literally anything.
There you go. There you go.
Thank you.
okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like I said, I completely agree that there needs to be some sort of oversight and provision with the state. I think figuring that out and figuring out exactly what willingness, engagement level, who, what, where, I think that can get sorted and slotted into the Marshall stuff.
I think if it can be a single sign off, right? Like this is an approved vendor. Go ahead and purchase from them as you see fit.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the way it works, because anything more involved than that is going to create gridlock.
God, I'm asking these questions because I'm gonna hold them accountable. If
I think approving them as a new vendor is not that. I think it's very reasonable. Like I said,
we actually did touch on this in the legislation draft we have.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah, I thought we did, but I just didn't want to emphatically say so without confirming.
Yeah, no,
doing that.
It should be. I'm going to throw around acronyms. It's a government thing. It should be a VOR. It should be a vendor of record. They're an approved vendor. Yeah. Any government agency can tap into them as a resource on an as-needed basis, right?
It was.
I think that's the way that this works.
That's fantastic.
Right.
And maybe even if it to prevent the stuff of like a future mayor not reading it the same way you do, potentially maybe making some changes there to make it more of equivalent. That's the way it works. Is the vendor gets approved and then they're free to transact at will with that vendor type deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
That might be beneficial as well.
If that ever happens, I'm going to make you a promise, right? Because I fully intend to fly back to Canada and watch the fuck out of hockey for the next 8 months, right? When I'm done. But if someone does something like that, I will fly back to San Andreas and I will make their life fucking miserable.
Are you going to be able to post that right now, Mr. Rizal? The update?
Yeah, it's going up. Yeah, right. Just
let's pause every other conversation until it does, please.
Once the
and then
DOJ
he'll retract it. I just want to make sure, because I want to be considerate of everyone's time here. We can all kinds of. Trust me, I love legal shit a lot, but Maxwell's going to put a bullet in my head, and Oxby's probably hyper pissed at me, right?
Oxby loves this stuff.
So let me
know about that.
Just okay. So I know the exact wording you're putting numbers on, so I don't have to say something after the fact.
Hey, give me a second. I'll send it to you. Hold on.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
I was hoping you'd say yes, so the rush felt a little bit more intensified.
I mentally wiped this whole room 3 times.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, I'm just wondering for the business on LSPD's perspective here. Would you guys want any sort of provision added to prevent future mayors from removing things from the armory?
No.
Oh, you want to leave it?
It's perfectly fine. I mean, look, we ask for something, they get it written up rather quickly, and
yeah, that works.
I think the law is always going to be evolutionary. You know what I mean?
Okay, perfect.
Marshall Blunt looks at the language I sent him. I have this philosophy when it comes to the law, right? It's that if we try and sit here and plug every gap and leak in the law, nothing will ever get passed, because every day someone new will come to the table and they'll find something new that needs to be added into it. And then you'll end up with a piece of weapons legislation that's 87 pages long. I don't think that's really good for anyone. I think that when these ambiguities result in some situation occurring, we always have the tools we need to resolve them, whether it's something disciplinary like impeachment or ACR, or even just citizens putting forward legislation, right? They can do that. There's a pathway to do that. So
yeah.
I think if there is any malice, I don't think like I said, I've been doing this for 15 months. I don't think I've created a perfect legal system. I don't think Nino created a perfect legal system. I don't think anyone did, right? I don't think a perfect legal system exists anywhere. But we've done it in such a way that if someone decided to be malice, the tools exist to correct that, right? So that's kind of my stance on it.
So, Michael, the only concern I've got here, right, and I agree.
feel like the
right,
marshals
there should be
cause
no
more
regular
damage than
emergency
good to the
marshal get
state.
Weapons license.
This guy
But if,
isn't
6A
even
and 6AI
involved
apply,
in
law
the
enforcement officers
ops,
are issued a weapons license
but
permitting
wants
use of
to
approved police-issued firearms. Police-issued
have
firearms include firearms
debates
procured from the Leo Specialized Armory.
over
Does
things
that not
and
imply that the marshal's weapons license does not authorize them to carry the weapons that they otherwise do? You know
us
what I mean?
headache.
That's where I think just excluding the dasMEHDI from the legislation entirely makes more sense. And then
We
just
can't do
addressing
that,
their
though.
stuff and
There's-
their weapons licenses in their own thing.
There's provisions in here that need to stay in law until the future change happens. That's what makes this.
I think, quite frankly,
Yeah.
the main thing marshals will be taught is conversation.
Oh my god.
Or something like if it's meant for that to apply to the marshals or like something that that SASM is authorized and DOC are authorized to carry in accordance with their standard operating procedures or something to that effect.
Let's look at this in good faith, right? 6A says what it does. 6AI says police issued firearms include firearms procured from the LEO Specialized Armory. It doesn't say police issued firearms are only those, right? Just that those are one thing included.
Right.
I think if someone interpreted that alone, then they're being petty.
Okay, as long as we're all on the same page and understanding there of that, then
No, I think that would be going back to what you said earlier. That would be a very, very petty interpretation of the law.
All right, like I said, as long as we're all on the same page and we don't try to use that inherently and to got back at us some way, then we can agree to that and act in good faith in the short term. I don't see any problem with that.
I would ACR the person who did that. I'll be honest.
I was told to check on Brian.
He's dead.
Yeah, I'm good.
What?
I'm living.
Yeah.
Okay, are you're all good?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Okay.
McAllister,
So
Gunner, anything else? Oh, sorry.
The thing here is that once we push this up and once the contest is removed, the 3 days has passed. So this is going to effectively become law right away. So.
Yeah, I believe so. That sounds right to me.
Okay.
And the drafts are going to be ready for Monday.
No, but yeah,
right?
probably.
What? Sorry?
Said the drafts are going to be prepared and ready for Monday.
Of what, the new marshal legislation?
Yeah, all those changes we discussed.
I'm not writing those.
I'm asking the marshals.
I mean, we've got the drafts that have existed for the last couple of weeks. I don't know, if a new director comes in, I imagine some of the things might change. So then inherently, no, the drafts would not be ready as of that day. Gunner, if you were the director, I don't know,
I think the current one
exactly what you're going to go with. But
yes, the current iteration I'm happy with. Yes,
I don't know the answer to that question. I guess is my answer.
Okay, all right,
it's not up to me.
Understood. I'm mostly asking, like, is it
way or shape or form that I can, and it with whoever the director. I'm just here to help, man.
As long as you have a baseline to work from, right?
Yo, I'm gonna hold.
I'm happy to provide that.
All right, hell yeah.
I mean, it's already in a spot that's easy to get.
Here to work in good faith for the betterment of the state. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah. Okay, I'm posting this up right now. Then.
I am trying to be like, I'm trying to send my concern. If I become director, I'm expecting that shit Monday. If I get a blank fucking piece of paper, they're gonna be heads rolling.
And if you could just make sure you notify the justice who you pushed it through. Was it Gates?
Yeah, I specifically sent them.
Yeah, just make sure you notify Gates as part of your retraction. And I believe you should get a refund.
Hopefully. But But I am glad that, we could have this chat instead of, going full referendum mode, because that's usually how these go.
I want y'all to imagine if this was an arbitration meeting, this would have been multiply this by 3x. You know what I mean?
It would have been a mess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking blah, yeah, no, I appreciate the just having a conversation about it. It makes life a lot easier.
Yep. All right. Hell yeah. All right,
Sorry, I
gentlemen.
wasn't more up to date. I didn't know the meeting was happening. I just woke up and they said they
Oh,
come
it's
to
all good. It's all
BCSO.
good.
I was
You're
like,
good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay. All right. Hell
And
yeah.
I'm falling asleep over here, fellas. I'm falling asleep.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, I've been awake.
appreciate it. Hopefully we can use this
Absolutely.
opportunity, and this is like a collective, right? Not directed at you, Marshals. Is that we hit these roadblocks, conversation first, set up a meeting, let's get it done. You know what I mean? As opposed to the legal channels of fucking molasses. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, all right, fuck it. All right. Well,
All right, sounds good.
See my 1-of-1 out there, Knight? You like that?
Awesome.
you're what? One of what?
1-of-1, that car I have out there.
I don't think I've seen your